Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. RCMP have issued a Canada-wide arrest warrant for a man they say is responsible for a fatal shooting in Fort Providence, Northwest Territories last weekend. Police have charged 22-year-old Christian Cogswell from British Columbia with murder, attempted murder, and 2 counts of aggravated assault. In a news release Wednesday, RCMP say Cogswell remains at large. 1 person was killed and 2 others were injured in Saturday's shooting, which RCMP say was related to the drug trade. They say Cogswell is considered armed and dangerous. He's also wanted by Inuvik RCMP for drug trafficking offenses last summer. One of his bail conditions was to stay out of the Northwest Territories. Anyone with information about Cogswell's current location is asked to contact RCMP or Crime Stoppers. Yukon's chief coroner has called an inquest into the death of a man near the Whitehorse Airport. Hugh Errol Riffle was shot by an RCMP officer during an altercation at the Air North cargo hangar in November of 2022. Police have said the man had a gun and was threatening employees. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team investigated the incident. It cleared the RCMP of wrongdoing last fall. The inquest will begin in October in Whitehorse. The presiding coroner and a jury will hear from witnesses to determine the facts and circumstances around Riffle's death. The jury may issue recommendations aimed at preventing similar deaths. Some patients in the NWT who had no medical costs before are now feeling a financial pinch. 6 months ago, the government of the Northwest Territories revamped its extended health benefits program. As the CBC's Nadir Hashmi reports, some patients say they may have to start saving for their deductibles.
A pharmacist says income-based coverage for drugs is creating significant barriers for many patients. The territorial government overhauled its extended health benefits program last September. It now covers everyone, not just people with specific chronic conditions. Those earning above certain thresholds now have a deductible and yearly maximum to pay. A pharmacist says that isn't always the best indicator.
The method of income can sometimes not always capture the uniqueness of each person and the financial strains or challenges they may be going through.
He says many chronic illness patients are struggling.
Where I've seen patients decreasing their doses, it is unfortunate. Going from not paying for your medications to paying for your medications is always going to be a barrier.
Saleh Mohammed says though some lower-income patients now have benefits, higher-income ones face high deductibles and rely on private insurances and out-of-pocket payments. The new program introduced income thresholds that vary by region and family size. For example, in Yellowknife, a single person without kids pays for drugs only if they earn over about $64,000. The yearly maximum ranges from $550 to $8,000. Katie Hart is from Yellowknife. She has cystic fibrosis and type 1 diabetes. Her medical costs are about $400,000 a year. As a university student, she doesn't feel the impact yet.
Right now, as I essentially have zero income, so I do fall in that lowest bracket.
Hart says if her future income exceeds thresholds, she'll always need to budget for medications.
So that's kind of an added stress.
In an email to CBC, a GNWT spokesperson, Andrew Wynn, says it's too early to assess the impact of the changes. Earlier, they estimated 2,200 additional residents who weren't covered before would now be eligible. Wynn says 853 people have registered so far, and they're encouraging eligible residents to apply. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
A longtime nurse in the Northwest Territories agrees that her profession needs its own collective agreement. A private member's bill tabled last week suggested that change to the NWT Public Service Act. But the union representing the Territories Public Service says the bill sets a dangerous precedent. Luke Carroll has more.
Sheila Leahy has worked as a nurse for decades. She's in support of the bill tabled last week and says the concept isn't new.
I went to meetings from Local 11 in 1993 that were about nurses getting their own collective agreement at that time.
Leahy says this would allow the government to offer perks to attract nurses. The bill recommends starting the process to change the legislation soon. This is because MLAs won't be able to change it when the union and the NWT government begin negotiations within the next year. But this recommendation isn't sitting well with a union executive. Jose Ann Spirito is with the Public Service Alliance of Canada North. She's also a nurse.
Giving the power to legislators to have such an impact on the way we bargain is opening a very dangerous door, a door that is dangerous for every worker across this territory. And I would go, since I represent workers across all 3 territories, I will say that this is a threat to all workers in the North.
Spirito says changing the legislation so quickly could have long-term ramifications. Luke Carroll, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The government of the Northwest Territories is making changes to the consumer carbon tax. As of April 1st, residents will no longer have to pay it. Prime Minister Mark Carney made similar changes to the federal legislation, but since the NWT has its own carbon tax legislation, it needs to make its changes. Without the tax, residents will pay less to fill their cars with gasoline or heat homes with propane. But it also means residents will no longer receive cost of living offset payments. Big emitters like mines will continue to pay the carbon tax. Residents will receive their final offset payments in April. A Yukon NDP bill meant to improve the transparency of political financing has been delayed. Bill 309 would amend the Elections Act. It would ban donations from corporations, unions, and people living outside the Yukon. It would also limit donations by individuals to $1,500 per party every year. The CBC's Joseph Ho has been covering the Yukon legislature, and he joins me now live. Joseph, why isn't this bill going ahead today?
Megan, when we spoke to NDP leader Kate White, she told us that she would move to adjourn debate and then reintroduce the bill later. So why would she do that? Basically, she says there was a drafting error that needs to be fixed. The mistake appears 4 times. The bill references the wrong section to be amended. This is a missed opportunity. Today is the first opposition Wednesday of the sitting. From this point on, they only happen every second Wednesday from this point on. It is a scarce time for debate on the opposition's motions, the opposition's bills, as opposed to the government's. And leading up to today, White posted a Facebook reel promoting this bill. White says the NDP is still serious about changing the legislation around political financing. She says, look at what they did in 2016. That year, the party stopped taking donations from unions. So some people might be wondering, what are the chances that this bill gets passed? Well, that is not so clear. The NDP has a confidence and supply agreement with the governing Liberals. As part of the deal, the NDP gets 1 bill to a final vote per sitting. And White says she's been working on a bill with the Yukon Medical Association. She says it would result in big changes for the medical profession. And she says that is the bill that she wants to get to the finish line. Megan?
Okay, thank you, Joseph. That's the CBC's Joseph Ho live in Whitehorse tonight. Experts in Arctic security have mixed views about a new radar system that will help detect threats to Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced the project in Iqaluit yesterday. It would see a series of radar systems built from the U.S.-Canada border into the Arctic. Funding was also announced for the military and for housing and infrastructure upgrades in Nunavut. The Canada Research Chair in the study of the Canadian North says the new funding is an important step towards Arctic sovereignty.
This is really exciting to think about the nature of the global threats that we're facing, the competitive environment that we're in, and thinking about what Canada's bringing to the table in terms of defending ourselves and the broader North American homeland. I think the Americans are going to be excited at this news as well.
Another expert is skeptical. He says the allocated funding is nowhere near enough.
He announced $20 million in federal funding for the hydroelectric project that'll be going in near Iqaluit, but it's a $500 million project, and that's a good example of how the Arctic is often treated. There's kind of this, there's fairly frequently this, ribbon cutting or big announcement that sounds really positive, but then when you drill down to the actual numbers, that's it's a very small percentage of the funds that are actually needed for this.
Hennifer says Canada needs a dedicated Arctic mandate, which would require different departments to collaborate on policy. He says the federal government currently looks at the Arctic through individual departments. A refueling station for the Navy in Nunavut still has no opening date after nearly 2 decades. The Nanisivik Naval Facility has faced multiple delays. It's located about 40 kilometers from Arctic Bay. It was initially announced by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper in 2007. The project is intended to be a resupply port and a year-round living space for military and civilian personnel. The Department of National Defense says COVID-19 and a washed-out road are some of the reasons for the delays. The National Defense Minister says the government has learned its lesson. In a news conference earlier this month, Bill Blair said the project has highlighted the need to ensure defense investments benefit both the armed forces and communities. His department says the wharf still needs replacing and fuel tanks still need heat added to be suitable for winter use. With the federal election looming, the NDP is in trouble. Its support has plummeted and it's at risk of losing official party status. David Thurton takes a look at the party's predicament.
Jagmeet Singh is a prolific campaigner, but the NDP leader heads into the next election facing this reality.
They kept the Liberal Party in power, and only for that reason I wouldn't vote for them.
It seems like their messaging and their branding really just hasn't been on point.
CBC's poll tracker, which aggregates public opinion polling, suggests a surge for the Liberals. The ruling party is now neck and neck with the Conservatives, but New Democrats are polling at new lows. Support for the NDP now sits at under 12%.
The NDP support has just tanked over the last few weeks, and they are in serious trouble.
Eric Grenier updates the poll tracker.
We probably have to go back to the 1990s to find the NDP polling so poorly and for this close to an election. I think this is what is really key for the New Democrats, is that right now they are in a lot of trouble and they're only a few days out from an election calls.
But the NDP says they're not putting too much stock in that polling.
I think it's been a very volatile time. I think for everybody who's watching the polls, we're not in the same place we were a few months ago. And I think we're going to see some more change before the dust settles.
Canada was meant to be the 51st state.
Donald Trump has turned the next election on its head. The ballot box question now, who's the best to take on Trump?
But now with Mark Carney coming in, I'm really giving him a good consideration.
Carney is the one. Like you look at his resume. Poilievre hasn't had a job other than being a politician.
This all leaves Singh in a tough spot, fighting for not only the NDP's survival, but possibly his own political future, according to this former campaign director.
This is going to be, I think, for Mr. Singh, the election of his political career. And if he can meet the moment and rise to the occasion, Canadians will reward him.
Let's get ready.
Lately, Singh has been showing voters another side while comparing himself to the Conservative leader.
Now, Pierre Poilievre, on the other hand, has had this paid for by the public dental and medical coverage. Yet he wants to cut it.
The NDP is an underdog in this race. As far as the party is concerned, there's still time to turn things around before voters make up their minds. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. President Donald Trump now says he would prefer to deal with a liberal leader rather than a conservative one following the upcoming federal election. The question is why? Karina Roman looks at the possible answers.
U.S. President Donald Trump told Fox News that Canada's conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, is no friend of his, and in fact, he thinks it would be easier to deal with a liberal. Fox host Laura Ingraham had suggested to Trump that the Liberals in Canada were now more likely to win a Canadian election, and asked Trump, wouldn't that mean Canada will be more hostile to the U.S.?
The Conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a Liberal. And maybe they're going to win, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me at all.
This comes on the heels of Trump saying a couple of weeks ago that Poilievre was not a MAGA guy, even though one of Poilievre's MPs is good friends with Vice President J.D. Vance. Poilievre responded by agreeing he is not a MAGA guy, and today he agreed again with Trump's latest comments.
Yesterday, the president said that having a liberal prime minister would be easier for him to deal with, just as he threatened once again to make us the 51st state. And you know what? On that point, it's true. I'm a strong leader. I'm a tough guy to deal with. I'm firm in my convictions, and I'll always put Canada first.
For weeks, the Liberals have been saying that Poilievre likes Trump, admires Trump, that his very words echo those of Trump. The Liberals released ads showing the two side by side saying very similar things. Such a framing is a problem for the Conservatives as Canada heads into a federal election campaign soon, in which who can best stand up to Trump will be a key factor. So, if voters take Trump at his word, they are not on the same page. A more cynical voter might see this, however, as Trump trying to help Poilievre by distancing himself. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
The claims period for 2 classes in the First Nations Child and Family Services and Jordan's Principal Settlement is now open.
First Nations children who were removed from their homes on reserve between April 1st, 1991 and March 31st, 2022, and their caregiving parents and caregiving grandparents can now submit a claim for compensation.
There are free supports to help you fill out your form.
And mental health and wellness supports if you need them.
Learn more and submit your claim at fnchildclaims.ca.
Having 2 kids in diapers impacts every part of our lives. The Canada Child Benefit allows us to give our boys extracurricular activities. It opens their world.
Find out if you qualify at canada.ca/every dollar counts.
Forced and coerced sterilization of Indigenous people is still happening. The Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice has supports available for Indigenous survivors. Join the National Registry and access up to $70,000 in healing support funds for individuals, families, and communities. The deadline to apply is March 31st. If you or someone you know has experienced forced and coerced sterilization, please call 1-877-386-0750 or visit reproductivejusticesurvivors.ca for more information.
When you're able to take the next step and invest in yourself and your future, that brings a ton of security.
Definitely something we never thought we'd be able to get if it wasn't for the home buyers plan.
Find out if you qualify at canada.ca/every dollar counts.
GST, HST credit, I wasn't expecting a lot back, but when I did check my account randomly and I seen it there, I was like, oh wow, it's a nice little surprise. Just getting that little extra, it means a lot.
Find out if you qualify at canada.ca/every dollar counts.
You are finally here.
Come on! Just talk to me. Woo! All you have to do is look.
Nothing can stand in your way. Are you still nervous?
No, not anymore.
Nunavut's chief public health officer has declared a whooping cough outbreak in Nauyat. It's a respiratory disease that affects the throat and lungs, and it can be easily spread. Children under the age of 1 are most at risk of severe illness. The Nunavut Department of Health is asking people in Nauyat to stay home and avoid contact with others if they are mildly ill. They also want people to call their health center if they have symptoms. Those include a cough lasting longer than a week, trouble breathing, and a high fever that lasts more than 3 days. Protesters in Montreal have vandalized a Tesla dealership in the city as part of a growing backlash around the world against Tesla owner Elon Musk. A backlash that's now threatening the company's bottom line. Vanessa Lee has that story.
2 young environmental activists filmed themselves as they spray paint the Tesla dealership. An act of vandalism in broad daylight.
They took this action to take a stand against the billionaire class. Elon Musk, who is the owner of Tesla, is currently taking control of the United States democracy and is dismantling it by defunding all environmental protections.
It's the latest in a spate of crimes targeting everything Tesla, as founder Elon Musk's influence grows in the White House. Vehicles and charging stations have been defaced or damaged, and showrooms the site of Tesla takedown protests in recent weeks. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force is investigating after Teslas were shot at and firebombed at a service center in Las Vegas. In Vancouver, the International Auto Show says it has removed Tesla as a participant at this week's event.
The political position on this has absolutely no bearing on the decision. This is purely from a safety point for our guests and our attendees.
Musk says he is shocked by what he calls hatred and violence from the left.
Tesla is a peaceful company. We've never done anything harmful. I've never done anything harmful. I've only done productive things. So I think we just have a deranged, there's some kind of mental illness thing going on here, because this doesn't make any sense.
But Musk has seen the haphazard slashing of the U.S. federal workforce. Some believe the backlash against the electric car maker is just the beginning of a larger movement against Donald Trump.
It's kind of the low-hanging fruit in a mass protest that is going to ramp up against, this kind of whole administration.
This growing wave of anger directed at Tesla is having an impact on its bottom line. Shares have fallen more than 40% since January. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
If you have a sweet tooth for chocolate, you might need to brace yourself. Your favorite chocolate bar might get a lot more expensive, and it's not just because of tariffs. Ethan Williams tells us why.
Faye Moffat is hard at work making her next batch of specialty chocolates, but the Saskatoon chocolatier is finding it much more expensive to purchase the cocoa she needs for her sweet snacks.
In 2023, it was about $3,300 a ton, and now it's up to about $10,000 to $12,000 a ton. So it's 3 to 4 times increased over the last year and a half.
It all stems from poor conditions for growing cocoa. Major cocoa-producing countries in West Africa have faced extreme temperatures, floods, and drought in recent growing seasons, ruining cocoa harvests. And conditions are only getting worse.
All of these different impacts are traced, they're more extreme and they're more frequent due to climate change, even though you can't attribute necessarily a single event due to climate change. But these have been tracked over the last 10 or 20 years, and you can see the increase in intensity and frequency.
One researcher says despite the resulting price hike on chocolate, the profits are not reaching cocoa farmers, preventing them from adapting to climate change.
They are not able to invest in their farms to regenerate their cacao trees, have more productive trees that are planted, or fight the disease and viruses that are affecting the tree.
It's not just the weather thousands of kilometers away that impacts Moffat's Saskatchewan business. Hotter summers here and hot temperatures lasting well into fall can melt her chocolate creations.
On weeks where it's, in high 20s or 30s, we tend to not ship our chocolate unless our client really wants it. And then we will put ice packs in, but there are definitely times where we just have to slow our shipping.
And keeping all that chocolate cool with those ice packs and air conditioning is costly, adding to the already skyrocketing price of cocoa. And while she may not be able to buy her cocoa locally, Moffat says she works to buy everything else for her shop from Canada, supporting local industry while saving a few dollars. Ethan Williams, CBC News, Regina.
An Alaska Native language teacher is being honored for his work on a popular children's show.
So, you'll try to change the name?
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
This episode of Molly of Denali won a Children's and Family Emmy Award on Saturday. It's titled Not a Mascot. In it, Molly and her friends talk about challenging problematic sports mascots and other behaviors that stereotype Indigenous peoples. The episode won the Emmy for Outstanding Writing for a Preschool Animated Series. Gune Lance Twitchell was one of the writers. He's a Tlingit language revitalization advocate and scholar based in Juneau, Alaska.
Exaggerations of an invented form of Native American culture. It was exciting to try and tackle that in a 11-minute preschool episode. Just trying to sort of push things away from that because it involves pretty harmful and generalizing stereotypes of a singular Indigenous culture.
Twitchell says winning the Emmy is not just for him, but for all Indigenous people working in the industry. You can stream episodes of Molly of Denali on CBC Gem. The weather is starting to clear up in parts of the Kivalliq region in Nunavut after several days of blizzards. Arvik, Baker Lake, and Rankin Inlet were forced to close yesterday. Ronnie Soluk lives in Arvik. He says he saw a snowdrift at least 15 feet high while walking to a store.
Wind and blowing snow, when you're walking in either direction, the snow gets right into your face.
Environment and Climate Change Canada says blizzard-like conditions aren't unusual at this time of year in the Kivalliq region, but it is unusual to see that type of weather last for a number of days, like it has in Arvik. That community is still under a blizzard warning. Blizzard conditions started there on March 16th. Now let's take a look at the weather across the north. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
I was fighting losing battles with opponents disguised as friends, and coming home to a different fight that never ends. I saw no other choice. I had to leave a roof for the rain. But sometimes I wonder if there was a path with more to gain. Maybe the opportunities would have been better, and every day would take me further towards something greater.
To help create new paths for youth experiencing homelessness, the Home Depot Canada Foundation is committing $125 million by 2030.
Earth is our collective home that makes us all family. As family, we strive to love and protect each other. Diversity of species is our strength. We are all connected. We survive and thrive together. We celebrate many things this season and make many choices. Taking care of our family should be the easiest. We're in this together.
One good scheme deserves another.
Stay on him.
I feel we may be in for a challenging few days.
Cheers. Cheers.
12 new records for a penny.
Sounds too good to be true.
It's not a scam. Cancel anytime. It's all in the fine print.
You're going to end up on the hook for a lot more.
You think I'm stupid? I used your name to sign up.